Welcome, the anointed ones. You may not have a throne, but kings are still watching you. Sounds dramatic? Good, because it is. Let me break something to you. While you're minding your business, healing, hydrating, and trying to figure out what to cook for dinner, your name is being whispered in rooms you've never entered. And no, I don't mean your ex's group chat. I'm talking about elite circles, high-level networks, and secret societies where your presence is a problem, not a trend. They're not watching you because you're loud. They're watching because you're loud in the spirit. Because every move you make, quiet, holy, unbothered, is disrupting ancient agendas. Here's a wild fact for you. The CIA once admitted in declassified documents that remote viewers and spiritually gifted individuals posed a real intelligence interest during Cold War operations. Translation: they've always been watching the ones with unexplainable light. So while you think you're just journaling your emotions or posting an inspirational reel, someone behind layers of clearance and titles is squinting like, who is this and why can't we figure them out? The truth is, they don't want you to know how powerful you look when you're just being you. Because when a chosen one moves in purity, it shakes their empire of illusions. But don't panic. You're not paranoid. You're just finally aware. And trust me, you're not the only one watching this video. Let's get into it. Number 1. They're studying your scar tissue, not your smile. They're not impressed by your smile. They're analyzing your scars. The elites, those with real power, the kind that doesn't post about it, aren't interested in charm or charisma. What has them leaning in is the fact that you're still standing after everything meant to break you. You don't even realize how many times your name has come up in conversations where your survival was never expected. What they're watching isn't your glow, it's your grit. They want to know how you got up after being emotionally gutted, how you keep showing up without the usual support systems, how you carry that kind of peace without privilege backing you. They're not drawn to the surface stuff. They can buy that. They can manufacture followers, fund a brand, create trends. But what they can't fake is what you carry, the depth that comes from pain you didn't let poison you. And so they study it. They call it resilience. But it's really divine engineering. You've been through betrayals that should have rewired your soul, but you stayed intact. You've endured isolation that could have made you bitter, but you became sharper. You have the kind of energy that refuses to die, and that terrifies people who only feel powerful when they're in control. You're being watched because you don't fit the mold. You weren't supposed to get this far. Not with that background, not after that heartbreak, not with all that trauma. But here you are, clearer, wiser, stronger. They don't admire you, not publicly, but privately. They dissect your life like scripture. Your scars are teaching them what their money never could. Every breakdown you survived is a masterclass they're trying to reverse engineer. You didn't sign up to be a blueprint, but you are. You didn't ask to be studied, but your endurance is louder than any microphone. And somewhere behind a desk, someone with influence is wondering how a person with nothing keeps winning like they're heaven's favorite. Number 2, you're the case study in their rooms of control. You've become the topic in rooms you don't even know exist. High-level people are studying your life not out of curiosity, but out of concern. You're unpredictable. You don't follow their patterns, you don't worship their idols, and you don't bend to the rules that keep everyone else in check. That alone makes you a threat. You've become the case study in systems built to control, conform, and contain. And they don't understand how someone like you slipped through the cracks and stayed free. You don't have the background they expect. You weren't groomed by their institutions. You didn't come with connections, funding, or elite endorsements. Yet you keep showing up with wisdom that exposes their deception. Your existence disrupts their algorithm. You're supposed to be invisible, or at least irrelevant, but your presence keeps echoing. You're doing things they can't trace, affecting people they thought were under their influence, and that's why they're watching you, more than the ones with big platforms and louder voices. Because unlike the scripted players, you're moving off divine instruction. That makes you unreadable. They don't care about the noise, they monitor patterns. And your pattern doesn't fit their template. You're not chasing trends. You're not manipulating for influence. You're not tied to the same currency of approval they've trained the world to chase. You're moving from something ancient, something internal, and they don't know how to replicate it. In systems designed to measure obedience, your freedom is a red flag. And the longer you stay authentic, the more dangerous you become to the structure they've built. You've become their unsolvable variable, the one who breaks the equation. They're dissecting you not to celebrate you, but to find a flaw. They want to locate the weak point that explains your strength, because if they can't control you, they want to discredit you. But here's the twist. They can't crack what God coded. And you're not a glitch. You're a divine disruption they didn't see coming. Number 3, you're the proof. Their bloodlines can't manufacture divinity. The elites have spent generations trying to perfect bloodlines. They've married into power, protected their surnames like treasure, and built entire empires around legacy. But none of that gave them what you carry naturally. You weren't born into their system, yet you walk with a kind of authority they can't replicate. That's what keeps them up at night. You don't come from money, but you carry something that feels ancient, like divine royalty wrapped in an ordinary body, and they know it. Your presence alone is a problem because it proves that God's favor can't be inherited through titles, bloodlines, or institutions. You're walking proof that destiny doesn't need a resume. They spent decades trying to buy power, and here you are, carrying it without even asking for it. That's why they study you. That's why you confuse them. You're not moving with entitlement, but with something deeper, something that feels like it came from another realm. They've tried to manufacture spiritual influence through rituals, secret knowledge, and manipulation. But you showed up, untouched by their systems, carrying revelation they can't decode. Your wisdom didn't come from books, it came from wounds. Your clarity wasn't given by gurus, it was carved by survival. They don't want to admit it, but everything they hoped to engineer through control, you were born with through divine design. It's not that you're better, it's that you're real. You're the kind of soul their power can't fabricate. That's what bothers them. You have a purity they can't purchase and a connection to God they can't imitate. No amount of access or influence can make them what you are. And the fact that you exist outside their gatekeeping exposes a truth they've tried to hide. That no title or bloodline guarantees favor. Only alignment with purpose does. You're the glitch in their hierarchy, the unexpected arrival, the unfiltered voice. And your presence silently declares a truth they never wanted spoken. God doesn't choose the polished, he chooses the prepared. Number 4, they don't want you popular, they want you silenced and monitored. They were never trying to stop you from shining. They were trying to make sure no one noticed when you did. The real agenda has always been about containment, not confrontation. They know they can't kill your light, so they try to keep it in a box. They don't want you to go viral. They want you to stay invisible just long enough for them to study your every move. They'll downplay your influence in public, but behind closed doors, your name is circled in red. You're not being ignored, you're being watched. When you speak, it's not just words, it's activation. You carry revelation that cuts through illusions, and they know that if the right people hear you, systems will start to crumble. That's why you've been underestimated on purpose. It's not that you're not powerful, they're just terrified of what might happen if others realize it too. So they create distractions, manipulate algorithms, isolate you socially, and keep your voice out of rooms where it could spark revolution. They don't want your truth to spread, they want it contained like it's a virus. This is why you felt so unseen even when you're doing everything right. It's not your imagination, it's strategy. They'll let counterfeit voices rise to the top because those voices serve the system. But you break it, so they shadow ban your spirit before you ever touch a platform. They'll gaslight you into thinking your gift isn't needed, when in reality they're working overtime to make sure it doesn't reach the ones it was sent to wake up. The plan has never been to stop you, it's been to monitor you. They want to know when you're close to breakthrough so they can distract you. They want to know who's listening so they can intercept. But here's what they didn't expect. Every time they tried to silence you, they gave you more fire. Every attempt to contain you has made your message more refined, more targeted, more divine. And they can't mute what God has already amplified. Number 5. You were flagged by their systems the moment you woke up. The moment you started questioning what everyone else blindly accepted, you lit up on their radar. Not because you said something loud, but because you thought something dangerous. You started breaking mental contracts with the systems that trained you to comply, religion that demanded obedience over truth, media that fed fear over facts, and cultural narratives that boxed in your identity. And when you did, you became something they couldn't ignore, aware. You weren't flagged because you did something wrong. You were flagged because you stopped sleeping. These systems run on predictability. They rely on people doing what they're told, following the script, and chasing validation from the same broken sources. But you unplugged. You stopped feeding the machine with your belief, your energy, your attention. And that's when the alarms went off. You're not just seen as someone who broke free. You're seen as someone who could set others free. And that makes you a disruption to everything they've built. You don't just see through the matrix, you threaten to expose the wiring. That's why things shifted around you so suddenly. The friendships that fell apart, the strange opposition, the random obstacles. It wasn't bad luck. It was surveillance turning into interference. They call it dangerous consciousness, because people like you don't just change opinions, you shift atmospheres. You walk into a room and the energy responds. You ask questions that unravel carefully constructed lies. You refuse to play small in spaces designed to keep people spiritually asleep. And that scares the hell out of those who profit from mass control. They tried to contain you through guilt, shame, religion, ridicule, but it didn't work. Because once you wake up, you can't go back to sleep. You've become a living glitch in their control grid, proof that divine intelligence doesn't need permission to rise. They see it, they fear it, and they're watching your every move. Not because you're lost, but because you finally found yourself. Number 6, they use people around you to extract intel. The eyes on you aren't always behind cameras or screens. Sometimes they're sitting right across the table, smiling. The people being used to monitor you don't even realize they're part of a system. They think they're just checking in, just catching up, just worried about you. But the sudden interest in your life, your plans, your emotional state, it's not random. When elites want intel on a chosen one, they rarely come themselves. They use people who already have access to your heart. You might have noticed the pattern. That friend who ghosted you suddenly pops back up asking weirdly specific questions. That family member who never cared about your calling suddenly wants to know who you're talking to, where you're going, what you're building. They're not malicious. Most of them are just emotionally baited. They're being used without their awareness. They've been spiritually manipulated to believe that their curiosity is concern, or that they're helping you. But what's really happening is surveillance masked as care. The system knows they can't read your spirit through technology. Your downloads, your intuition, your divine guidance, it doesn't live online. So they go after what does have access, people with your trust. And if those people are operating with unhealed wounds, jealousy, or spiritual blindness, they become the perfect vessels. It's not always evil intent, it's open doors, trauma, insecurity, ego. That's how the enemy gains access. They don't come asking for your passwords. They come asking how you're really doing. They study your speech through someone else's report. They track your growth by analyzing your relationships. And the wildest part, they don't need to be in your life to know your steps. They just need someone who is. This is why discernment is critical. Not everyone who loves you can walk with you, and not everyone who listens to you has pure ears. In a world where spiritual warfare is real, the greatest threat to your elevation often hides in familiar faces. Stay wise, stay sealed, stay 3 steps ahead. Number 7. You carry DNA codes. They've been trying to suppress for centuries. This was never just about who you are on the surface. It's always been about what's hidden inside you, what's flowing through your very blood. You carry something ancient, something they've spent centuries trying to erase. You're not just spiritually gifted, you're biologically encrypted. There are codes inside you, real frequencies, divine blueprints, inherited awakenings that connect you to a truth much older than this world's systems. Your DNA doesn't just tell your family history, it tells your spiritual assignment. For generations, elites have tampered with bloodlines, rewired history, and rewritten truths to suppress the rise of certain people. They've created entire structures through science, religion, and education to convince people they're powerless, average, or unworthy. But they couldn't get to you in time. You slipped through the cracks of their manipulation, untouched, unedited, fully loaded with what they've been trying to bury. Your very existence is a glitch in their agenda. The things that come naturally to you, intuition, dreams, foresight, healing, wisdom, aren't just quirks, they're activations. Your blood carries spiritual technology, information that didn't come from this generation. You inherited light, not just life. And when you started waking up, those codes began to unlock. That's why certain knowledge hits your spirit like you've always known it, because you have. It's encoded. It was never taught. It was transferred. They don't just fear your power, they fear your origin. Because if people like you continue to wake up, it exposes the truth that divinity wasn't meant to be centralized. It was seated in people like you. You are the evidence that they didn't destroy the original line. You're proof that heaven planted seeds in places their empires couldn't reach. You didn't come through privilege, you came through prophecy, and while they were focused on controlling the spotlight, God was preserving the real light in you. You carry the codes that activate others, and they can't stop what's already running through your blood. Number 8. The spirit world alerted them about you before you were even born. Your battles didn't start when you grew into purpose. They started before you could even form words. Long before you ever made a decision, your arrival was marked. There are people in high places, both physical and spiritual, who were alerted about your birth. Not because of your status, but because of your assignment. You didn't just enter the world, you were sent, and that sent a ripple through the spirit realm. Something in you triggered attention. Something in you disrupted the flow before you even had the language to understand it. That's why your childhood was never normal. While others were allowed to be carefree, you were thrown into battles far too early. You weren't just mistreated, you were targeted. You went through trauma that didn't match your age, and deep down, you knew it. You sensed the warfare, even if you didn't have the words. The constant confusion, rejection, and emotional chaos weren't random. You were flagged as a threat before you ever spoke your first truth. The elite don't just rely on data, they rely on spiritual intelligence. And within that realm, you were a warning. You carried a vibration, an energy signature that alerted ancient forces of control. You are someone they hoped would never awaken. But even asleep, your presence was a problem. That's why they tried to crush you before you could rise. The abuse, the neglect, the betrayals, they weren't just personal. They were strategic attempts to shut you down early. because once a chosen one fully activates, they can't be stopped, only delayed. They didn't start watching you because of your success. They started long before you had any. Your potential alone was threatening. You hadn't said a word, but heaven had already whispered your name across timelines, and those whispers reached the wrong ears. That's why so much of your pain felt unfair. It wasn't fair, but it was confirmation. Confirmation that even in your most powerless state, your existence was powerful enough to shake the agenda. You weren't just born, you were announced. And they've been trying to silence that announcement ever since. Number 9. They want your blueprint, but not your burdens. People admire the way you speak, the way you move, the way you command energy without even trying. But they don't really want your story. They want the outcome without the process. They study your presence, your confidence, your light, but they avoid asking where it came from. They want your blueprint, but not your burdens. They want your oil, but not the crushing that produced it. There are people, even in elite spaces, who take notes on how you carry yourself, how you connect, how you lead. They mimic your tone, your expressions, your essence, but they're copying the product, not the pain. What they don't understand is that everything you radiate was earned in fire. Every drop of your wisdom came from a chapter that nearly broke you. Every ounce of your strength was forged in silence, in nights when nobody checked on you, in battles nobody saw. They want to capture the magic without facing the madness. But your glow isn't performance. It's survival. It's the echo of what you've overcome. What they're chasing is the end result of years of spiritual warfare, isolation, rejection, betrayal, and rebuilding. They want to download what you lived through. But there's no shortcut for authenticity. There's no fast track to what you carry. Your anointing wasn't gifted, it was wrestled for. This is why you feel both admired and misunderstood at the same time. People want what you have, but they'd tap out if they had to carry what you carried. They're attracted to the power but allergic to the process. They want your confidence, but not your scars. They want your influence, but not your internal battles. They want your voice, but not the silence you had to endure to find it. And that's why God gave it to you, not them, because only you were willing to walk through the fire without losing your integrity. You didn't just survive. You survived and stayed soft. And that's the part they can't imitate. You didn't just go through it. You grew through it. And no imitation will ever carry that same weight. Number 10. You're their worst nightmare in plain clothes. You don't need a platform, a pulpit, or a spotlight to shake the atmosphere. You walk into rooms quietly, but your spirit speaks volumes. And that's exactly what terrifies them. You're not wrapped in status. You're not dressed in validation. You don't come with credentials, connections, or fancy labels. Yet somehow, when you enter the space, everything shifts. That's not normal, and they know it. You are power in its rawest form, untamed, unbought, undeniable. The world they built worships symbols, titles, wealth, public approval, curated perfection, but you bypass all of that. You carry a kind of authority that wasn't assigned by man, but embedded by God. That's what makes you so dangerous to them. You are spiritual disruption walking around in everyday clothes. While they're busy trying to prove power with optics, you live it without ever raising your voice. You don't have to announce yourself. Your presence exposes what's fake around you. They can't market you. They can't manipulate you. They can't control your narrative because you're not dependent on their system to be who you are. And that's the scariest kind of person to those who live off controlling perception. You are proof that the real ones never needed a stage. That divine purpose doesn't need a costume. That favor doesn't have to be flashy. They've trained the masses to only recognize authority when it looks like success. But then you show up, unassuming, grounded, real, and people feel something they can't explain. That's not charisma, that's consecration. You've been through things that burned ego off your soul. and what's left is something no influencer or politician can copy. You're not flashy, but you're real, and that makes you lethal to a system built on illusion. You are walking evidence that God never needed a platform to validate his vessels. You don't look like the threat, but you are. You're their worst nightmare dressed like a regular day, and by the time they realize it, it's too late. The light has already disrupted the darkness. Number 11. They know you're protected. That's why they operate through cowards. If they really thought they could destroy you, they would have tried by now. But they haven't, and deep down you've noticed that. Not because they're scared of you, but because they're terrified of what's around you. They've studied you. They've watched you up close and from afar. They've tried subtle attacks, emotional sabotage, and psychological traps. But every time they got close, something unseen stepped in. Plans crumbled. Access was denied. That's not coincidence. That's divine protection. They know you're not walking alone. They've sensed it. That unseen hand over your life, blocking, rerouting, covering, hiding. There are things that should have taken you out years ago, and they know it. That kind of resilience isn't natural, it's spiritual. And because they can't fight God, they settle for sending cowards. They won't face you head on. They'll use people. People close to you. People with grudges, insecurities, weak spirits. They won't confront your strength. They'll manipulate someone else's weakness to get to you. That's why the attacks rarely feel direct. It's never the elite themselves. It's the gossip behind your back. The sudden drama in relationships, the confusion that shows up when you're about to make a breakthrough. These aren't random. These are orchestrated distractions, all designed to wear you down emotionally and spiritually. Because the truth is, they can't win the real battle. The real war is being fought in dimensions they don't have access to anymore. And they're losing. You weren't just chosen, you were shielded. The protection around you doesn't make sense to them. That's why they're obsessed with discrediting you instead of confronting you. They need to make you look crazy, unstable, difficult, because that's the only way they can explain why their attacks don't work. They can't say, this one is covered by God, so they say, this one must be delusional. Let them talk. Let them throw their smoke screens. They can send all the puppets they want. It won't change the truth. You're untouchable, not because of who you are, but because of who sent you, and they know it. Number 12. They can't buy what you carry, and that infuriates them. Most people have a price. Influence, recognition, a little status, a little luxury. That's all it takes to make them fold. But you've refused every bait they dangled in front of you. You've seen through the applause, the fake opportunities, the open doors that came with invisible strings. And every time you chose purpose over perks, you proved something they hate. You're not for sale. That makes you rare. That makes you dangerous. That makes you the kind of powerful they can't control. What you carry can't be purchased, replicated, or negotiated. You didn't build your identity on validation, so they can't threaten you with rejection. You didn't rise through popularity, so they can't cancel what they didn't create. Your value wasn't assigned by men, it was sealed by God. And that's why you walk with a kind of quiet confidence that unsettles people who rely on titles and followers to feel important. You've been offered shortcuts. You've been handed tempting distractions disguised as blessings. But you knew better. You knew the price wasn't worth your soul. And while others climbed fast and fell hard, you stayed rooted. You chose slow growth with integrity over instant gratification with compromise. That decision cost you exposure. It cost you relationships. But it also made you untouchable in a world where everything is up for sale. They've tried to figure you out. They've tried to bait you, label you, lure you into partnerships that would water you down, but you keep choosing obedience over opportunity, and they can't stand it, because in elite circles, the one who can't be bought becomes a problem. You're the glitch in their formula. You're the variable that doesn't respond to the usual leverage. They're not used to dealing with people who know their worth without needing a price tag. That's why they watch you so closely. That's why they can't figure out how you keep going without the system behind you. What they don't understand is favor is not for sale, and neither are you. You're not powered by money. You're powered by mission, and that's why they'll never own you. Number 13. Your anonymity is your shield, but it's also your weapon. You're not invisible. You're preserved. The silence around your name isn't a punishment, it's protection. While others rush to be seen, God has kept you hidden on purpose. Because what you carry is too valuable to be exposed too early. If they had seen the fullness of who you are before you were fully sealed, they would have launched attacks before you were even equipped to defend yourself. So God let them overlook you, underestimate you, bypass you, not to break your confidence, but to build your foundation in peace. You've probably felt the tension, knowing there's something massive on your life, but not seeing the recognition to match it. That's by design, because premature exposure is one of the enemy's favorite tools. He'll hype you up too soon just to watch you crash when you're not rooted deep enough to carry the weight of influence. But God didn't let that happen to you. Instead, he wrapped you in obscurity while the oil matured. And now your anonymity has become a weapon. Because while they weren't watching, you were training. While they were focused on followers and clout, you were learning how to fight demons in silence. You were building character, not just charisma. You were developing substance, not just style. So now that they do see glimpses of you, they can't figure out how someone they ignored for so long suddenly has this much depth, authority, and spiritual weight. The elite circles know you exist. They know your voice is different, your presence is different, your insight is disruptive. But because they didn't see your rise happen in public, they don't know how to stop it. That's the power of being hidden. They can't destroy what they can't track. They can't block what they didn't see coming. You're already planted by the time they realize you're growing. You're already rooted by the time they notice your name is moving through spaces they don't control. Your low profile isn't a setback. It's your divine strategy. Because while they were sleeping on you, God was waking up everything in you. Number 14. You're not in their world, but you're about to disrupt it. You weren't born into privilege, but you were born with purpose, and that makes you more dangerous than anyone sitting at the top of the pyramid. You don't move like them, speak like them, or crave what they crave. That's exactly why your presence is so disruptive. You're not in their world, but you threaten the very foundation of it. Because unlike them, you're not trying to be accepted. You're not climbing ladders they built. You're here to expose the cracks in the system they swear is unshakable. Your path didn't come with shortcuts or golden invitations. You were developed in dark places, in pain, in prayer, in isolation. You didn't learn from professors. You learned from pressure. And that's the difference. They were polished. You were processed. God didn't pull you out of a palace. He raised you in the wilderness, far away from the spotlight, far away from noise, far away from systems that would have diluted your voice. Because he wasn't grooming you for popularity, he was training you for war. That's why your presence hits different. You weren't made by the system, so you're not loyal to it. You don't need their approval, you don't need their platform, and you sure don't need their blueprint. Your instructions come from a higher dimension. That makes you unpredictable, and unpredictability is the enemy of control. They're used to building empires out of echoes, people who just repeat what's been said before. But then you walk in, original, unshaped by their influence and full of power they can't audit. And suddenly their orders start shaking, the rules stop applying, people start waking up. Because you're not just talking, you're activating. You're not just different, you're divine interference. You weren't sent to compete with them. You were sent to confront what they thought was untouchable. And what makes it all the more threatening? You're not looking for a seat at their table. You're flipping it over. They thought you were just another face in the crowd. another soul to monitor, dismiss, or manipulate. But what they didn't see coming was the force you truly are. The storm wrapped in stillness, the blueprint hidden in plain sight, the divine disruption sent straight into their system with no warning and no need for permission. You were never meant to blend in. You were meant to break through. Every attempt to silence you has only refined your voice. Every trap they set has only sharpened your discernment. Every delay was divine. It gave you time to anchor yourself in truth while the world got drunk on illusion. Now they're watching closer than ever, not because they admire you, but because they fear what your awakening means. You're the proof that real power doesn't come from titles, bloodlines, or platforms. It comes from obedience, fire, and divine origin. And that kind of power, it can't be bought, branded, or controlled. You're not in their world, but you're shaking it from the inside out. Not with chaos, but with clarity. Not with noise, but with presence. You're the one they hoped would stay asleep, but you're awake now. Fully, fearlessly. And there's no putting this light back in the box. So let them watch. Let them study. Let them whisper your name in rooms built on pretense. Because you were never made to impress them. You were sent to outlast them. And trust this. The same God who kept you hidden is now the one revealing you. Strategically, purposefully, and powerfully. Not to entertain the system, but to dismantle it with truth. You're not coming. You're already here, and they know it. If this message lit something up in your spirit, don't just scroll away. Tap in and stay connected. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss another word meant to activate you. Like this video if it confirmed what you've always known deep down. Drop a comment. Your voice matters here, and your story might just be the encouragement someone else needs. Share this with someone who's also walking through the shadows with power in their bones. Don't keep this revelation to yourself. This isn't just content. It's confirmation. This isn't just a video. It's spiritual alignment. Let's grow together. Let's rise on purpose. Because you're not watching this by accident. You were led here. God bless you. God bless.